Egypt of the Pharaohs linked Africa, Europe, and Asia, extending throughout the Mediterranean basin before assuming today's geographical proportions. The first traces of human activity in the desert reach back to the heart of the Stone Age. But progressive desertification of the Sahara resulted in the mutation of a hunting and gathering civilization into a sedentary one. Nomadic North African peoples settled along the Nile Valley. It took 3,500 years before a homogeneous civilization was created along the entire Nile Valley from the delta all the way to Nubia. The main centers were so-called free cities, independent, trading with each other as well as Mesopotamia and Asia Minor. That was when the time of the Pharaohs began, lasting 3,000 years, during the course of which 30 dynasties sat on the throne of Egypt. The first sovereign of the first dynasty was, according to legend, Menes. His reign began in the year 3050 before the Common Era. Divine royalty became the center of creation for a people who were to be among the most inventive in human history. So it was that when the Greeks and Romans were only beginning to form their worlds, Egypt had been sculpting, painting, and building for 3 millennia. Today, millions of visitors pay homage to that exceptionally enterprising civilization. From these temples has come the world's richest collection. Located in the heart of the Egyptian capital since 1902, it's the one in the Cairo Museum. A museum unique in the world because it gives what no other can, a complete panorama of a civilization. At the founding of this creation is a Frenchman, Auguste Mariette, an Egyptologist, who stood at the foot of the pyramids in 1850 and with passion and patience assembled the inestimable collection. His funeral monument is a part of the museum, one of the most peaceful spots in the city center. Today, the museum displays 136,000 items representing the years of discovery. It's difficult to find your way. A guide is necessary. Our guide is Jean-Pierre Cortegiani, in charge of scientific relations at the French Institute for Oriental Archaeology in Cairo. He's published a scholarly guidebook for the museum. It's more than a guide, it's an initiation into Egyptian archaeology through judicious choice of 120 items.
Ce que j'ai voulu, c'était essayer de choisir des objets qui soient...
I wanted to select objects that were in a real sense a pretext for what each one could say.
Que ce soit sur
regarding art history, or the history of Egypt itself, or why not the discovery of Egypt, what the archaeology was like in the 19th century, the turbulent episodes, for example, those linked to Mariette. My aim was the discovery of things that one doesn't often see. The result of these reflections will guide our steps through the museum, where every day 3,000 visitors come. Past the main hall and the side galleries is the atrium, a sort of introduction, feeling the atmosphere. An impressive beginning, the colossal statues of Queen Tiyi and Amenophis III. Beneath their gaze, and in no hierarchical order, a certain number of characteristic pieces. Beginning with a bas-relief, from a temple to Mentuhotep I, one of the most important monarchs of the Middle Empire. Near a series of sarcophagi, several pyramid tips. The pyramidion, including those dedicated to Amenemhet III and Kenjer. Nearly every temple contained sacred boats. Undeniable symbol. In this period, commerce and travel were carried out on water. Equally symbolic, the palettes for grinding the colors for makeup. This one, called Libyan, no doubt evokes the conquest of the swampy lands of Libya. The stonecutter's art is clearly expressed in this cut, representing wickerwork. The oldest known royal statue of Kasekem, one of the last kings of the Second Dynasty. Found in 1885 on the site at Memphis, the statue of a kneeling priest is characteristic of archaic sculptures. The first of the great periods evoked in the museum stretches from the years 3300 to 2280 before the Common Era. The Egyptians were then regrouping into small communities along the Nile, trading with Africa and the Phoenicians. At the beginning of this period, the two emblems of the upper and lower realms of Egypt were united: crowns, scepters, and plants. Under the impetus of King Menes, the rivalry between the two peoples was temporarily halted. The capital, Memphis, gave its name to the commencing empire, the Memphite. With the Old Empire began the great era of classical Egypt. King Djeser, founder of the Old Empire, was the first pharaoh to give tombs monumental dimensions. The kings had their tombs built on the Saqqara Plateau and its surroundings. Stone began to be used, and royal funeral monuments progressively took the pyramid shape. Even today, they bear witness to the universally recognized splendor of the period. This brilliant civilization went on developing, attaining in every domain the highest peaks. A consummate art appeared in the tombs of Giza and Saqqara. Scenes of remarkable finesse are carved there, portraying daily life in detail. The best-known pyramids are those of Cheops, Khephren, and Mykerinos. 100,000 workers in relays every 3 months for 30 years were needed to cut the stone blocks, bring them to the site, and build the pyramid of Cheops. Conditions were the same in the building of the Khephren pyramid. Unlike his predecessors, Mykerinos, a pious and respected man, had his built in a quieter style. The end of the Sixth Dynasty, nevertheless, would see a decline in royal power. The country was sliding into a long period of troubles, out of which later would emerge a renewed state. In the Cairo Museum, this slice of history, extending over a period of 1,000 years, is reawakened on the ground floor, in a series of rooms in the main West Gallery. The museum displays 3 of the 4 Mykerinos triads. They were discovered in 1808 in the Temple of the Valley, the smallest pyramid of Giza. The remarkable finesse in the sculpturing, the lifelike precision make this display of birds on papyrus an excellent example of the artist's talent. Undoubtedly one of history's most often reproduced figures, Sheikh el-Beled. In fact, it's really a chief ritualist named Kaper. But the workers who discovered him found such a striking resemblance to the mayor of their village that they conferred his name. Next to Sheikh el-Beled, a family group and a seated scribe. The colors are especially well preserved. The hallway leads us to a series of statuettes, including one in alabaster of Kefren. Close by, this bas-relief traces the procession of men and women personifying domains found by Sahure, second king of the 5th dynasty. Discovered between 1902 and 1908, this story on stone forms a part of an ensemble that gives us a better understanding of complex royal funeral rites under the Old Empire. Another element in this complex, a false door placed at the end of the sacred funeral chapels. It's through here that the deceased enjoys the offerings that the living leave for him, and it's through this stele that his soul can visit the world at will. Discovered in 1871 by a dealer who requested permission to look for animal bones, the statues of Rautep and his wife Nefret. Their shining eyes terrorized their discoverer when candlelight suddenly brought their gaze to life. This room contains typical examples of sculpture in the Old Empire. In the place of honor, the largest and oldest metal statue ever found in Egypt. It portrays Pepi I, life-size. The torso and members were made of pounded sheet copper and then assembled. Accompanied by flutes and harps, a concert at a funeral where we discover the dwarf Seneb and his family. He's seated cross-legged to hide his infirmity. To balance the group, the sculptor has placed his 2 children in the place where his legs would have been. Other celebrities of the Old Empire, the Medum geese, made in stucco, and a paint that would serve the Egyptians for almost 3 millennia. In the years 2280 to 1780, after a first intermediate epoch, Egypt enters the Middle Empire, on a territory only somewhat stabilized. The slow disintegration of the monarch's authority would drive Egypt into a century of anarchy, during which 70 kings reigned, barely 60 days each. Restoration of Egyptian unity and royal power were achieved through efforts of the governor of Thebes, Mentuhotep II. He induced a new period of prosperity for Egypt, a brilliant era of political and administrative reforms, a period of economic progress and internal peace. At this time, the rise of Thebes began, becoming one of the most celebrated cities of the ancient world. Mentuhotep II made his residence in what is today Luxor. A period of religious reform, the Middle Empire witnessed the first temples dedicated to the god Amun, built at Karnak. Facing Karnak, the mountains of Thebes became the burial ground of kings, replacing the pyramids. At the time, Karnak had 2,000 square kilometers of fields and over 400 gardens where some 8,000 people worked. But the Middle Empire fell as the Old Empire had 4 centuries earlier, the combined force of inner struggles and foreign invasion. Statues of this period are found mainly in the gallery. It's typified, and this is an innovation, by its degree of realism, especially in the faces. The entrance to the Hartotep funeral chamber. The fine reliefs in this gallery are not unlike those of the White Chapel at Karnak. Around the room, 6 seated statues of Sesostris I, conveying an impression of what must have been the degree of perfection at that time, even when works were, in a sense, mass-produced. Kings no longer appear as serene gods. Faces like this one of Sesostris III reveal their emotions. The same realism for this little-known veritable masterpiece, a statuette of the major domo, Sakaherka. During the New Empire, a period of renewed royal power, any prospective attack against Egypt was snuffed out. There followed a vast territorial expansion whose purpose wasn't so much colonization as defense. Succeeding a period of trouble and disorder, the new empire constituted a time of prosperity. As proof, the rich funeral treasure of Tutankhamun and the number and quality of monuments that were erected then. But one of the main characteristics of the period is the increased role of religion and the clergy in affairs of state. Like its predecessors, the new empire would be destroyed by inner conflict. It went into a slow decline from which the country would never rise. At the far end of the museum, aisles allotted to the new empire bear the mark of Queen Hatshepsut. She proclaimed herself regent of the realm and reigned for 22 years, like a king, to the point of dressing as a man, and even wearing a false beard. Remarkable, this casket of a cat from Memphis. Contrary to custom, it's of stone, and especially covered with written text and drawings. Once again, Queen Hatshepsut. This time she is a sphinx, traditional incarnation of kings and queens, with an expression meant to terrify. Its double is in a New York museum. In the last room of the gallery, a work discovered at Deir el-Bahari. It represents Hathor in his favorite guise, as a cow. It's protecting and nourishing Amenphis II. All around are the best examples of royal statuary in the 18th dynasty, especially a group discovered in 1903 in an aisle of the great temple of Amun at Karnak. It's one of the rare portraits of Thutmose IV, here with his mother, Queen Tia. And once again, Queen Hatshepsut. Upon her death, her second husband had shattered all the images of the one who had deprived him of power for 22 years. Objects from Tel el Amarna are grouped in this room, notably including the most beautiful face of the entire museum collection, Queen Nefertiti. Nearby, another exceptional portrait, because here the model has a rare expression of serenity. The controversial Amenphis IV, Akhenaten. Almost hidden in a corner, an historic stele discovered in 1896 in the Temple of Merenta. Historic because the line next to last makes the only reference to Israel in Egypt of the Pharaohs. If the name Saqqara is automatically associated with the pyramid having steps, it should be remembered that this was the site of the necropolis at Memphis. So many beautiful sepulchres of the new empire were found there. For example, that of Amenemhet, overseer of craftsmen and master goldsmith. He's seen in this scene worshiping the goddess Sekhmet with his family. During the Nile floods, Ramses II had the power to intervene directly with the god Amun so that the water level would reach exactly 16 cubits, deemed to be ideal. That's what this statue reminds us. Also found at Karnak, the colossal statue of Seti I. To make such a masterpiece, the body was divided into 21 parts, which individual artists would fashion, and then the pieces be assembled. Just the opposite, this tiny statuette, supple and finely made. It represents Pharaoh Osorkon III, pushing a small boat dedicated to the pharaoh Amun-Re. Beaten by Asian expansion into the Middle East, which it opposed only to protect its independence, Egypt willingly agreed not to be African, but rather Mediterranean. Entirely oriented toward this new civilization center, it was bound to link its destiny to it. Preceded by his fame, Alexander the Great was welcomed into Egypt as a liberator. After founding Alexandria, he stood as protector of the religion, taking on a kind of Egyptian patriotism. Thus, for a period of time, Egypt could harbor an illusion of its own survival. Egypt became Roman, but could not be a province like the others. Supplier of grain to Rome, it drew economic strength from this, as well as its geographical position as a link to 3 continents, becoming an essential cog in Roman political policy. In the temples, new tendencies and ancient art confronted one another. The increasing influence of the Greeks and then the Romans was expressing itself. Notably at Edfu, Dendera, and Philae, in sculptures there is more attention to detail. Often real masterpieces were produced. In the western section of the museum, various pieces from this period can be admired, beginning with those of the so-called lower period. Curators have placed caskets and sarcophagi here. One of them is exceptional, that of the dwarf Theos. Religious texts usually carved on the cover are here replaced with his portrait. Another exception, he is depicted naked. In 1920, a local farmer showed the location of the sarcophagus of High Priest Patusiris. The cover displays 5 columns of hieroglyphics fashioned in colored glass, remarkably like precious jewels. Probably the most beautiful example of a royal sepulchre of the 25th dynasty, the head of King Taharqa. Originally, the hair was gold-plated. More a demon than a divinity, the goddess Tueris. Auguste Mariette said this statue is too perfect. And it is above the others in this room, even though they are all of high quality. In the center of the West Gallery, homage is paid to a worshipper of the god Amun, a princess vowed to celibacy, a wife of the god. Her role is to guarantee royal succession through adoption. The divine worshipper, Amenardis, here in a close-fitting gown, an attribute of the divine woman. The most representative pieces of the Greco-Roman era are in this room, around a relief of Ptolemy, with an offering to the bull Bukis. Every year, the 50 rooms on the ground floor containing mainly statues are visited by more than 1 million people.
الجنوب والتاج الأحمر تاج الشمال وبنجد على مؤخرة ظهر الكرسي الملك توت عنخ آمون وزوجته.
Deshalb sie ist so genannt, Kanopgefäße, aber hauptsächlich war für die Eingeweide gerichtet.
後咧，仙境裏邊發現有3個嘅殘簡。嗱咁陣間會入到一個 treasury 咧，就係全個圖坦卡蒙最值得睇嗰幾樣嘅最值得。
When they found the chariots here, Carter, when they found inside the tomb of King Tutankhamun in 1922, they were in pieces.
Mesdames, Messieurs, la visite se poursuit maintenant au premier étage, 55 salles dans lesquelles se trouvent essentiellement.
Before going to the next level, a stop in the most impressive room of the entire museum. Here are the mummies. Among them, Ramses II, 3,230 years old and still a young man.
We are using here a modern technique. This technique is simulating the actual atmosphere in the tombs itself. It means we have studied a lot of tombs, a lot of sites, and we have the mean parameters which affect direct or indirect to the situation of the mummy. Other words, we are making a very accurate microclimate, especially for the mummies, taken from the tombs itself.
Together with Professor Nazri Iskander, a team works at restoring mummies.
We have here 27 royal mummies. We already finished from 11. Now we are working in the next 16, and we hope we can finish this during 6 months.
The 55 rooms on this floor contain mainly objects, and they let us continue to move in time as the visit progresses. In time measured by this clepsydra, discovered at Karnak, a water clock based on the simple principle of a liquid flowing at a regular rate. Beside it, a variety of objects, carpenter's tools, silex blades, attesting to the skill of the craftsman. Equally remarkable earthenware objects, a noble material, which the ancients called brilliance. It's not enameled clay, but a glass glazing which craftsmen had mastered from the earliest days. Earthenware on a monumental scale, on the doors to funeral chambers in the pyramid with steps. Here the squares are literally sewn together using plant material. A dozen windows shelter the objects found, mainly in digs at Saqqara. The embodiment of evil, because it destroys crops, the hippopotamus pollutes the banks of the Nile. Again, using Egyptian earthenware, a pendant necklace and representation of a hedgehog among the dozens of objects found near the dead in the burial collection. On the limestone sides of Princess Kauit's sarcophagus, typical scenes are portrayed. It precedes caskets of kings, queens, and priests of the new empire. Almost all of them are from Deir el-Bahari, near Aswan. A main division on this floor of the museum. Rooms dedicated to Tutankhamun, and those containing objects of furniture, starting chronologically with an invaluable collection of funeral beds. Along this gallery is a series of rooms displaying objects from royal tombs. Here are those of the 18th dynasty of the new empire, 1400 years before the Common Era. The oldest illuminated book in the world, the Book of the Dead. It would accompany the remains of wealthy Egyptians, guaranteeing protection. Among other things, it would spare the deceased from having to work in the kingdom of the dead, and let him or her become a divine falcon. This papyrus of King Maherpa measures over 11 meters and contains 26 chapters of prayers, like this one allowing the tomb to be open to the soul and to a shadow. In the tomb of Senedjem, construction tools tell us that he was a chief overseer of building at Deir and Medina. This is where generations of workers lived when they were edifying the Valley of the Kings. Sealing the vault of Senedjem, this door was one of the few that pillagers hadn't opened before the official Antiquities Service could. From the time of the Old Empire, people of quality weren't content to ensure their survival by simply covering the walls of their tombs with bas-relief. In addition, the death statue was surrounded with models of servants carrying out their daily tasks for all eternity. The scene depicting the noble Merketre inspecting his herds is considered the most beautiful of the wooden models. Discovered in 1920, it is from the tomb of the Chancellor and Major Domo of Mentuhotep I. The only known statue in this form of a royal Ka from the tomb of King Hor. The Ka is a sort of representation of vital energy, protective and creative. A sarcophagus is considered the house of the dead and decorated according to the mummy's position. On the cover, eyes at the head level let the deceased enjoy a view of the world outside. And since this one is for General Sepi, the surrounding statues are his troops frozen in a mysterious warlike posture. Royal steles from the first two dynasties commemorating the great moments of the reign are grouped here. After the collections of the Middle and New Empires, on the other side of the atrium, the Greco-Roman period. Remarkable. Masks of incomparable richness, but especially the ultimate evolution of Egyptian funeral masks, portraits said to be of Fayum, made in wax on the wooden strips. The richness of the ancient Egyptian pantheon occasioned all sorts of animal-human combinations. Practically all such representations are found here. Horus, often with a falcon's head. Ptah, the god of Memphis and patron of sculptors and metalsmiths, among others. As a sort of notebook, ostracons could preserve drawings and texts on wood or limestone, much less costly than papyrus. Because the shape of these vases resembles the silhouette of Osiris, who was worshipped at Canope, antiquarians in the last century called them canopes. Intestines were sealed in them at the time of mummification. An answer to the question of how the artists had light when working far from daylight. An oil lamp of overseer Ka. Inventiveness, originality, even in the tiniest details, artisans have proven their incomparable ability throughout all the eras of ancient Egypt. Four rooms and 2 galleries are barely able to contain the treasures from one royal tomb that comes to us intact, that of Tutankhamun. An example of the treasurer's richness, this mask in pure gold and encrusted with lapis lazuli, set imposingly in this room reserved for jewels. The Valley of the Kings. This is where everything began. After 5 years of digging, on the 4th of November 1922, the Briton Howard Carter uncovered part of a stairway cut into the rock. 12 steps down, he knew that his persistence had paid off. This was indeed the tomb of Tutankhamun. 299 items were taken to the museum. Each of them is a masterpiece, made of noble materials, gold vying with precious stones. In the North Gallery, 4 large catafalques, beside them an alabaster chest. In the jewel room, where pieces from every period are found, this hammered falcon's head, except for the beak, is made from a single sheet of gold. In a profusion of jewels, a chain decorated with 3 golden flies, discovered on Queen Autep's mummy. The uraeus belonging to Sesostris II. All the pharaohs wore this third eye, which was meant to protect them. Along the corridor parade beds shaped as lions, hippopotamuses, and sacred cows, leading us to Tutankhamun. Alabaster vases in various shapes are chiseled, hollowed, and engraved with great delicacy. In a country where the economy depends upon water, boats are a part of daily life. This explains the great number of them found in Tutankhamun's tomb. In this collection of carved and sculpted chairs, the little throne encrusted with coral, turquoise, and lapis lazuli is surely the most famous. Egyptologists haven't always found the significance of many statues of the king. But the one as harpooner is explained. As the earthly incarnation of Horus, Tutankhamun is about to throw his weapon. This is an allusion to the myth that Horus, in a dispute with his uncle over royal prerogative, harpooned Seth, who had taken the form of a hippopotamus. This chest for holding the royal sandals is undoubtedly one of the most remarkable pieces in all of Tutankhamun's burial furniture. It's decorated with 6 scenes, recounting exploits of the hunt and of war, of a king who surely had hunted, but who died too young to have been a soldier. On the 17th of February, 1923, Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon entered the funeral chamber for the first time. They were taken aback by this statue of Anubis, the god guarding the necropole. Even today, at the entrance to the Tutankhamun gallery, he seems to be continuing his vigil, indifferent to the din of noise around him. The Cairo Museum has already moved twice and now sees the results of digs from everywhere in Egypt accumulating in its storage areas. A number of projects have been suggested. They will give the public increased access to the treasures, which make this location one of the 3 most visited places in the world. This is confirmed by Dr. Sahel Nagar, former curator of the Giza site.
Pour le musée du Caire, nous avons un très grand projet.
For the Cairo Museum, a certain number of projects exist. The Minister of Culture has begun a study with a group of high-ranking specialists. The place has been chosen, not far from here, not far from Giza, at the crossing of the highways to Fayoum and Alexandria. Will it be a second Cairo Museum? It will be a large museum, perhaps the biggest in the world. The project is beginning, and of course it takes time to complete such a museum. Many things will be transferred from the Cairo Museum. All the same, the Cairo Museum will remain, specializing in one collection or in one period. It all depends. Having completed facilities for the future, another museum is to open in Aswan. It will house all items coming from Nubia, that region beginning at the gates of Aswan and ending at Sudan, where digs are constantly taking place. It will be a part of the Antiquities Service, along with the Luxor Museum, open since 1975 and tracing the Greco-Roman period of Alexandria, and others more modest, but worthy of attention, at Meloui, Zagazig, and Ismailia.
Il y a des masses de choses à découvrir.
There are masses of things to discover. As proof, whenever we start looking, we find many, many things. In fact, Egyptologists say that many sites already probed promise great discoveries, mainly in the Giza and Saqqara regions, where some specialists thought that everything had already been catalogued. Pure luck was responsible for one of these recent revelations. It changes quite a number of historical verities. A horse fell in a hole, revealing a tomb. Inspecting this necropole and its surroundings astonished the experts. They had discovered another Giza, a great burial ground with innumerable objects and new architectural and historic evidence. This land, which in the past captivated Herodotus, Strabon, Caesar, and Anthony, that fascinated some 300 scientists who discovered the site with Napoleon's army, this land hasn't yet revealed all its secrets. This is surely what creates the air of mystery that millions of visitors come every year to share. From Aswan to the Delta, the Nile, cradle of all civilizations, remains the only holder of secrets, 5,000 years of history. Over the years, only the works of humanity can be destroyed. The spirit that created them will never perish.